This is an ocarina, and you may or may not know how to play one, but I had a viewer actually ask me if you use articulation methods and tonguing techniques on ocarina, kind of like you would other woodwinds. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. If you haven't been here before, my name is Cody Johnston and I write music as Braille Atlas. I also do a lot of fun stuff with this guy right here, automaton, ocarinas, and a bunch of other stuff. I write instrumental music that hopefully just kind of brings a little bit of adventure to your day. And so we're going to try this whole YouTube thing out. The user asked about ocarina and what articulation methods you use with it, what tonguing techniques you use with it. And I just kind of want to go over a little bit about some of those basics of how to kind of make your notes go from sounding muddy as crap to sounding like something a little more professional, a little more sharp. First things first, what is articulation? Articulation on instruments is basically just how to make notes have variance, how to variate the note. A lot of times when people start learning to play, especially on something like ocarina, it sounds a little bit like this. That didn't sound terrible, of course, but that's not exactly as crisp as something, say, like this. That's where articulation comes in and understanding some of these different techniques, which brings up the other point that they asked, tonguing. And tonguing is a way to articulate an ocarina, one of a few different ways. I'm going to cover all three different ways of articulation that come to my mind at least, and how to do different tonguing techniques and those other two articulation techniques as well. So the very first articulation technique that comes to my mind is, of course, breath pressure. Ocarinas, being that they are vessel flutes, unlike a lot of other woodwinds where you have to have a very correct embouchure, that's not really as exact with the ocarina. So there is an embouchure, but it's very much just kind of similar to kissing the mouthpiece of the ocarina. You don't really want to bite down on it, roll your lips, anything like that, like you would on other woodwind mouthpieces. You want to just kind of pucker up and give it a smooch. You want to very much direct the air straight down the windway over the fipple, almost like you're blowing down a straw. Of course, different breath pressures can kind of make or articulate, I guess, is what we're talking about, the different tones. So I'm just going to go from a very low breath pressure to a higher breath pressure on just the basic C note here, and I'm going to kind of let you hear what that sounds like. Now notice whenever you're actually increasing breath pressure, you can kind of make the note a little bit sharp or a little bit flat, which are all methods used in articulation. The next thing, of course, for articulating notes, and this works especially whenever you're moving between notes, is to variate how you place your finger on the different holes. So there's something on a lot of flute type instruments, or I guess maybe flute's the wrong word, but a lot of whistles, that is called half holing, where you are kind of making sharps and flats by going. Notice what my pinky's doing here. So you can kind of do that, but you can also use that to articulate different notes. So it's not used a whole lot, but it is one method of articulation, especially whenever you kind of get into more faster playing. So you're going. You can kind of see me sliding. That's articulating the notes between the two, or I guess between the two different notes. Then we get into tonguing, and that's really what we're talking about here outside of just what articulation is. Of course, tonguing is the main part of our articulation. So without tonguing, like I said, it just sounds like one constant note. And there's time and place for that. That's typically not where you want to do. So one of the first things you really want to kind of get down is making the T sound. So think of like how you would say to or talk. So that kind of a consonant roll of the tongue kind of flicking off the top of your mouth. The t. And so when you do that timed in between notes, instead of going from, you go to. It chops up your notes. That's just the best way to say it. In order to do another version of that, which is a difference in, I guess, breath pressure that kind of gives it a softer instead of the it's the k sound, or the I guess a K sound, or a th almost. It's more in the back of the tongue instead of the front of the tongue. So instead of sounding like the you're going so this is the versus k. It's a little bit softer, gives a little bit more of a walk into your note. That's another articulation method. And then combining the two, so you have TAhKah or the TAhKah method, as I've heard it called before, which gives your notes a bit of a faster feel. So instead of having to go, you can go, which sounds ridiculous, I know, whenever I'm just sitting here doing it at you. But on an ocarina, it sounds like this. So it's great for things like playing, I don't know, Song of Storms. Kind of having a little bit of a faster flow of your notes, but it's not too fast, kind of a mid-fast range. You kind of get what I'm saying. So to hear what Song of Storms, those first few notes would sound like without anything, it sounds like a mess. And then to just try to do the method, it's so it doesn't quite have the punch and the flow, the ebb and flow that you would want for that specific track. So it's the and then, of course, from there, if you're trying to get even faster in playing, you can, I guess there's almost like this rolling in the back of your, I don't know how to describe it other than like a helicopter noise. Like, so you're kind of like a low rumble toward the back of your throat. And that can give you some nice, not completely staccato, chopped up notes like that, but maybe even kind of, they kind of flow almost instead of being like a direct, like square pattern. It's more of like a nice gentle sine wave or something like that. So, and then if you want that more aggressive, you do the same thing with the t sound, but rolling your tongue. So little things like that is where you would use that specific sound. So when you start adding all those things in together, that's whenever you really start to have variety. You start being able to use different breath pressures to change notes. So like also, you start playing those faster notes. That's whenever those T's and K sounds really get into place. And of course, you saw me rolling my fingers for the articulation there. So yeah, there's a lot of articulation methods within this tiny little gourd flute. I think it's one of the most beautiful things about ocarina is how they're very simple. I mean, it's just a chamber with a mouthpiece. And there's not a lot of room for major error. And I think that's one of the big things too. I've heard it said best that ocarina is extremely simple to start, but quite a bit more difficult to master. And I think that rings true even in this video. So I hope you guys got something out of this. If you have any requests for video types, song covers, whatever it may be, drop them in the comment section. Of course, if you would give this video a like and a follow, and I would really appreciate that.